Welcome to the Decide Your Legacy podcast, helping individuals and businesses unleash their potential. Join us every episode as host Adam Gragg discusses what is holding us back and how to find hope for moving forward. Along the way, we discuss developing healthy relationships and navigating life transitions while overcoming fear, stress, and anxiety. Live the life you want, the legacy you decide.
When you know what you want and you have some clarity about what you want to move towards, addiction gets in the way. And what I mean by addiction is anything that you get consumed with that's pulling you away from those best actions that you can take to move your life forward, your health forward, relationships forward, your business forward. And I also find that addiction is coming out of fear, because that next better, greater thing is, we know in our gut intuitively that it's a much better situation for us, but we're terrified of it. So today's podcast, we're going to talk about asking for what you want. I have a special guest today. It's actually my dad, and I'm going to introduce him in just a second. So there is this tremendous fear of rejection. So we don't ask for what we want because we could get embarrassed. They could say no. We could just feel horrible about ourselves, and when we can get stuck in our head and doubt ourselves, and this whole cycle starts to move forward. That's what we're talking about today. We're going to figure out ways. I have 3 major tools, steps you can take to start asking for what you want. I'm going to mix in a bunch of questions that I'm going to ask my dad related to asking for what you want. And I'm going to tell you why he's going to be a great person to give us some feedback based on his career and how he's lived his life. So this is episode number 120, can you believe it, of the Decide Your Legacy podcast. This episode is on fear, basically asking for what you want, dealing with rejection. I wanted to share one thing, as I do every episode, that is scary that I've done in my life. Recently, I share this because there's nothing more important for your mental health than facing your fears, and nothing more damaging to your mental health than playing it safe. So recently, I was in a part of town of Wichita where I live and run the business, and I was by a business I had done some work for before in the past. I stopped by their office out of the blue. It's a company with a couple hundred employees, and I talked to one of the leaders there just out of the blue, and I asked if we could get a time to visit because I had some new ways I might be able to help their company. And she said yes. And I met with her and the other leader of the company. And then they ended up hiring me to do some work for them. But I would never have had that opportunity had I not stopped out of the blue, which is not something I normally do, and asked for some time, which led to a meeting, which led to a sale. And it's actually led to a really great relationship, just a new type of relationship with this company than I've had in the past. Super exciting and energizing to me as well. So that's something that I did recently. I'm your host, Adam Gragg. I am a coach, a content creator, a speaker. I love helping people find transformational clarity so they're prepared to face their fears, which helps them grow their confidence and live their legacy. By living the legacy, I mean living the life now that they want to be remembered for when they're gone. So they're actually making the most of everything they have now and in the time they have now, because it's fragile. And to live life takes courage. And so I'm a fellow traveler. I do not have it all figured out. I create this podcast, not just for you, but for me as well. This is a podcast where you get to do uncomfortable things as well. So that means you take some kind of an action right now just to get started on this content. So I want you to think and to write this in on a piece of paper, write it in your journal, speak it into your phone. What is something that you're afraid to ask for in your life? So is it you're afraid to ask your wife to change some aspect of your relationship? You're afraid to ask your husband for more time. You're afraid to ask your dad to spend time with you. You're afraid to ask for that sale, or afraid to ask for a promotion, or you're afraid to ask for a raise, or you're afraid to ask somebody on a date, or to even ask somebody for lunch, to coffee that you find is interesting. Asking people to go play golf with you. What are you afraid of? I want you to think about that as we go through this content. The reason I wanted to talk about this topic is because recently I've been doing a lot of work growing Decide Your Legacy. And one aspect that I've been working on is figuring out a better sales strategy, a better marketing strategy. And sales and marketing are different. Marketing is how people are viewing your organization. It's ongoing. Sales is asking somebody to buy. All right. I'm working on my fear of closing a deal, of reaching out, of telling people about the business. I see a ton of potential right now with Decide Your Legacy. And I think the main thing that holds me back is me, because I'm the leader. I hold the company back because I have my own fears I'm working on. That's why I wanted to do this interview today. And I was inspired too. A week and a half ago was Father's Day. I've thought about having him on this podcast for a long period of time. But the way I want to think about sales too is make a potential rejection. And this is a mindset shift for me, a potential success. So if it could be an area where you're rejected, it could also be a place where you could actually succeed. So let's go ahead and jump right in. So Dad, I'm going to ask you some questions about sales and asking for sales. So just, tell us about yourself.
Well, it's Eric Gragg, and I was born in Visalia, California in 1939. So
Okay.
I'm one of three children. I was the oldest. And
So you were born in 1939. I'm just curious, do you have any memories of World War II?
none, except maybe some newspapers. I saw newspapers on it.
Okay, so how did you originally, tell us, what was your very first job growing up?
Well, the first job with an independent company, and not something where I went on my own, but actually my very first work was out calling on the neighbors. So I liked to do that, and I had fun with it. But the first job, I guess, that was newspapers, and I had 3 paper routes. And, so I would get up at 4:35 in the morning. And so
Well, what do you mean by calling on the neighbors?
I had a lawn business that I could mow lawns, so I did a number of different things. But the first actual job where I was actually working in a drugstore for a pharmacist, and that lasted a couple of years. And then I was like 15, 16 years old. And then I went to work in a grocery store across the street. So I was on that. I was working 7 days a week. I worked 5 days in the grocery store. I'd work Saturday in the bakery, cleaning the bakery, and I'd work Sunday in the meat market, cleaning all the grinders, cleaning the floor.
What was your motivation to start making money at 7 or 8 years old, though? A lot of kids are not really interested in that.
We collected bottles, and of course, maybe it was because we're right at the end of the Depression or something. But or during the war, things were short. So I can remember a red wagon and going to the neighbors and collect bottles and take them back for the deposits. So that the motivation was just to make some money and to have some independence.
Okay.
And do what I wanted to do.
What did you spend money on at 7 or 8 years old?
Just my own entertainment.
Oh, really? What was entertainment?
Well, like soda, a bag of peanuts, a soda, a candy bar.
Okay.
So everybody, and even though we were given, there's allowances were like 15, 25 cents.
When you were 7 or 8 years old?
Yeah. The movie was 10 cents.
Okay. So what were some of the challenges that you had in your family as a child? Adversity that you experienced? I know you had the surgery at a young age.
Yeah, that was 2 months old, but that didn't really affect anything. And the recovery time was real quick. But I had allergies, so I had to get allergy shots once a week. And then I couldn't eat certain foods. So I couldn't eat regular wheat bread. And so I had to eat cornbread, peanut butter and jelly sandwiches with cornbread, which a good day happened when somebody stole my lunch, because you can't put peanut butter and jelly on cornbread very easily, and you can't put ham and cheese on cornbread.
So that was an allergy to foods that you had.
Yeah, food allergy.
Yeah.
And I still have it to this day. I still am allergic to watermelons and cucumbers. And
what was the surgery you had at 2 months old?
It was called pleuric stenosis, and it was digesting food. And it was in the chest. I still have a big scar right there. It was 2 months old.
Yeah.
And it was common. It was a common thing where you couldn't swallow your food.
In 1939, you had the surgery. So that was not a great time to have surgery as a 2 month old, I bet.
But probably died,
That's pretty risky to have. Yeah.
Yeah, but everything came out fine. I never had any trouble with it, and the surgery was pretty standard, so they could get it done, and they knew what to do, and so. But they put a
Hmm.
good size in a 2-month-old. They put a 2-inch cut.
Yeah.
So that's
How old were when your brother was diagnosed with polio?
I was 14, I think.
Yeah.
14 or 15.
Yeah.
That's only 70 years ago.
Yeah.
So
Really?
they did come in and burn everything in the house afterwards, which they burned all our clothes, all the mattresses, everything. They weren't sure how people got polio.
So who burnt everything in your house?
The health department with the county.
It was mandatory
Yeah.
that you burnt everything
everything.
with polio.
Well, they picked everything up and took it away.
Did you guys have other people that you knew that had polio?
Yeah, a few, but Jean's mother.
Yeah.
So
My uncle's mother. Yeah.
She had polio and just died 4 weeks ago. She was 96, I think.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. Back then. So that all those
things have changed a lot.
So let's talk about your career history a little bit here, because that's what we're going to be talking about today. So what was your worst job of all time?
I guess the worst job I had was working in a cap shop. I was like 16 or 17. And every Saturday I had to take the dump truck, which wouldn't dump, but full of ground up tires that were ground down to fine sawdust, like sawdust or sand, and shovel that truck out, which usually took a 30-minute drive from work, and then back into the dump and dump that with a shovel, dump that truck and clean it out, and then go back and get another load. Or sometimes there'd be 2 loads, but not very often. It would take all week to fill it up. It'd be a week worth of grinding. In the cap shop, they grind the old tread off the tires. That's where this ground up rubber. So it got everywhere. It was in your nose, it was in your ears. You had to wear a mask. And
Yeah.
So it was
Probably would have to wear a respirator today for that kind of thing.
I'm thinking that was the worst job I had.
What was your first sales job?
First sales job or first attempting to do this?
First attempt to do sales.
My dad brought home 100 stationery packages, and he said, "Hey, if you can sell these," he said, "you give me 10 cents and you can have 15 cents and sell them for a quarter each." And so I went to the neighbors. They had 10 sheets of paper and 10 envelopes, and it was used in promotion with Firestone Tire and Rubber Company. So there was nothing on them, but they were good quality paper. And so I ended up selling the whole 100. He got me another case of them. I sold those, and then he couldn't get any more. I thought, so
you made some money.
I made some money.
I was asking you actually, and so what did you do with that money that you made from selling those stationery? How old were you then?
I was like 10.
So what did you do with the money you made?
Probably paid for half a shotgun. My dad had a deal that we had a 410 single shot that we used to hunt with, and he had a pump action, and so I wanted one of those, and so we went and if I put up half the money, I think it was like $90 for a shotgun in those days.
Yeah. So you took that money. Okay. And that's the shotgun you gave me.
Yeah. And then I paid for
I have that shotgun. Seriously.
Yeah, still do. And then I also, bought books because I like to read. So I do that, and magazines, and I paid for my own bicycle. So
back then,
so it that just got me certain things that I wanted.
What did you read back then?
Actually, the Hardy Boys was a good story book that we read. And then my grandmother gave me a book on the history of the world, and which was fascinating. And so you'd think I would have traveled more, but I've got a wife who doesn't like to fly.
Yeah.
So I don't travel as much, but we've been quite a few places. So
what was your favorite book as a kid?
I think The Count of Monte Cristo was
Really?
yeah, that was a
By Alexander Dumas?
yeah,
Really? I didn't know that.
and
That,
but I mean, I loved the mystery books, and so I used to come home from school, and there was no TV, and so I'd read a book. I'd get in the big chair and read a Hardy's
did
Boys
you read
book.
all the Dune books?
Oh yeah, they
You
were great.
loved those Dune books.
Yeah,
I remember that.
Dune was good, and that's
like
been
Dune.
35, 40
Have you seen the new
years.
movie?
I've
The
seen
second one?
one of no, I haven't
The
seen
second
the
one's
second.
pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah, the first one was it left a lot to be desired.
I liked it, but anyway. Okay, so that's your work history. And then, okay, first sales job, like career oriented, and what did you sell, and how did you sell stuff, and what's going on there?
Well,
Like-
that was when I graduated from college, I went to work for Certainty, and our job was selling truckloads of roofing and insulation. And so I had to call on architects, installation contractors, roofing contractors, and all really nice open guys to call on, give you good confidence because they respected that we were with a manufacturer, and they wouldn't buy the order direct from me. I couldn't sell them the order. They'd have to buy it through one of our distributors. So, but that was the very first job where I actually got paid and got a commission. Well, maybe not the first one, but it was close. That was the first one for an international company.
Okay. How old were you when you got that job?
I was 30.
30. Okay. So selling building products. And so let's go ahead and move on. So I want to, the first tool, I would say a key to keep in mind that I think of when I'm asking for what I want is to have some courage. Like it's one of the three that I'm going to talk to you. So courage, taking action, and that I find that after I do something, at first, I'm not confident in myself the first time I do it, or the second time, or the third time. So I know I'm doing something courageous when I'm really insecure about it. So I don't want to do it. And then I do it. And then afterwards, I feel much better because I've tried, or not always much better, but eventually over time. So if I have some sort of thing where I'm going to contact 10 businesses, I can be afraid and not want to do it. And then I start to procrastinate, get into addictive type behaviors, which for me can be worry, or it can be getting stuck on some other issue. It can be just looking and reading things, researching, over researching. So that to
Everybody has that though.
Probably so. Oh yeah. I mean, that's what I want to talk to you about. So courage, meaning like, how did you build confidence to go out and make sales calls?
Well, I was fortunate. I liked meeting new people. So, and also too, I mean, the very first time I might have been afraid, but it didn't so long ago that I've forgotten. But I loved to meet new people, and I loved the challenge of just knocking on the door and saying hello. And if they answered the door, and actually I tried that with knives when I was right out of high school and didn't do very well, but I kept knocking on the doors. And so I like doing that. In fact, some of the best deals that I've done were because I knocked on a door and met somebody new, or I was cold calling, and I enjoyed it.
Tell us about one of the big deals that you made you met somebody out of the blue and it ended up being a good experience professionally.
Yes. Well, it built more confidence too, because I had a piece of property I sold to a builder, and he needed tenants. So it was in an industrial area. So I had printed up a flyer, and I got with my partner, and we agreed to call all the businesses in this area, which were maybe there was about 50 or something like that. And I said, we'd meet back here at lunch. And so I went and made the calls, and then I got back to the restaurant, and the guy wasn't there. And it turns out he was back at the office. He hadn't made one call. And the calls that I made, I picked up enough business to take care of real estate problems for people, and made decent money. kept me a year to get through all the people that I met. And every one that I stopped at with a flyer and said, I have an empty building, I need some help finding some tenants for. If that didn't get them, then they had their own problem or question about real estate they wanted to talk about. So, it was a very profitable morning, and I ended up filling the building up. I ended up separating a business partnership because he wouldn't call on anybody. He ended up getting out of the business. But so I think it's your personality, and you got to like it. I could tell you a dozen stories of where it happened just like that, and it just stopping by, asked to see the owner.
So did you deal in that experience or in other times? How did you handle the rejection? Because surely not everybody was friendly.
Yeah,
everybody
was
friendly.
Everybody was friendly.
This is okay. I will believe in that. So all 50 of those businesses were friendly and glad to see a stranger.
Yeah, well, they weren't. Some of them were too busy to talk, and obviously, so I just say, "Hey, I've got a problem. You got a real estate problem. We'd like to chat with you." And so, and the secretaries usually, they would, because I was coat and a tie, and I wasn't, like I was peddling something. I told them all, I have a problem with a building down the street, and I need to talk to the owner of this building.
Okay.
And usually that got me in. If not, I think there's something else.
You would think something else? Okay. So, would you make stuff up?
No.
Okay.
Didn't make stuff up.
Didn't make stuff up.
I did have another experience where I went in and I woke up this boxer on the floor and he bit half my file. He came after me just like a flash, and they backed me up clear out the door and across the street. And I'm holding this vanilla envelope or vanilla folder in front where I've got these pamphlets in.
Huh. And that was a business?
That was a business. The dog, I woke the dog up and he said he doesn't usually do that, but I startled him.
So tell us about how you got into commercial real estate then. And then how old were you when you first got into it? And then
I was 41.
You're 41
40 or
when
41.
You started doing it full time.
Yeah, that's where I left the job that I got when I was 30. I spent 10 years there. And I ended up quitting 3 times.
From certainty.
And then they hired me back at more money each time.
Why did you quit?
Because they would cut the commissions. It's January 1st, they'd cut the commissions or set you a new level to get paid at. And usually your first 2 months were so short, you couldn't even make a rent payment or a house payment.
How did you do?
I did all right, but I had to quit. I actually had to quit. In fact, in one case, I gave notice. He said, well, I'm going to come up Friday and see you. And I said, whatever you want. I said, I'm giving 2 weeks notice right now. He couldn't come up Friday. He called me. I said, not a problem. We'll meet Monday. I put my house up for sale Friday. I sold the house because I had another job and was going to move to Modesto. And he came down and offered me more money. And I said, Reggie, I've already taken another job. And he said, well, I said, in fact, I've sold my house. It's sold. I got a deposit on it. And so I sold the house at that day and age for $42,000. That was $12,000 more than I paid for it. So, which was a lot of money. But you just had to take care of yourself and your family.
What would you tell somebody who is new in sales on how to best deal with rejection?
Well, I said, first of all, you got to face it. And you got to deal with it the best you can. And it's not fun, but everybody feels the same way. I mean, I felt everybody could cold call. So I'm always surprised when somebody says they don't like to do that. I said, man, that's more fun than, you meet so many nice, interesting people. But I cold called the CEO for one of the biggest banks in the world and ended up selling his building for $90 million. And he was very hesitant. In fact, I called him and then finally he called me back. And of course, this was 25 years ago, but the building was a pyramid building here in Sacramento.
Mm-hmm.
And they sold the building and signed a 21-year triple net lease on the building. And he called me back to tell me that they didn't think they want to sell it. And I said, well, we have a problem then, because my client has spent 700,000 on due diligence. And because of the soil was sandy where we built the building, it was right on the Sacramento River, and they had to go down 150 feet, and they put 11 shock absorbers that it would absorb a 7 or 8.0 hit on the Richter scale on this building. And so, and he was the biggest bank, and because he thought he might have to reimburse 700,000 my client, he closed a $90 million deal.
Wow. You think he did it because of that?
Oh, I know it. And I was crazy. I said, man, that's crazy.
Wow.
The deal never should have closed.
That's amazing. And you'd met him through a cold call? You didn't have any kind of connection?
No,
Yeah.
I called him and told him who I was,
Yeah.
and somebody gave me his number, I'm sure, because he was in Atlanta.
Okay.
I can't even remember the name of the bank right now, but it was huge.
So, and just so you know, for listeners out here, a cold call means that you're reaching out to somebody that you don't have any kind of connection with at all. So it's like, but I don't know how many cold calls actually really happen. Like that situation where you went to businesses that you didn't actually know at all around that building. Well, yeah, that would be, but there still was like a warm reason to reach out because you had a building right next to them, near their businesses, right?
Yeah.
So there was something that connected you. Like I think of a cold call, it's like I have no idea anything about. I'm in a neighborhood. I don't have any kind of relationship to these people at all. I have no building, nothing, whatever.
Well, I
you had
did
some
that.
kind of connection though to these people.
Well, I went after that day, like 2 weeks later, I got another building that actually I owned, and I went out of the area to a strictly warehouse area in West Sacramento. So I had no connection to any of the property owners at all. It just said, hey, I have a building, it's 20,000 feet.
Yeah.
And we need to get a tenant. You got any interest in more space? And basically that's it. But you're right. The first one was, but it was, I never met the guy. So that to me is a cold call.
And how did you get the listing with when you sold a piece of property once? Like you had a big piece of farmland at times. How did you get listings like that? This farmland with people that were
talk to the farmers, and it's like Valley View, that 138 acres, that was just grassland. But, I cold called the brothers that owned the land, and turned out they had just borrowed 300,000 and were paying 25% interest.
Oh, wow.
And I said, you guys need to get out of this. And it was a money broker. I'm not sure it wasn't part of the mob, but I got him the money. I got him 600 grand so they could pay that 300,000 off. And they kept 38% of the property. And they ended up making like $5 million on what I kept. So
it made them some money.
Yeah.
Definitely made them some money.
Well, they got them out of trouble. They were two college graduates who were in the cattle business, and they ran cattle on this property and other properties around. And their grandfather, Gary Ure, was a pioneer like our family. And he came to California and picked up land at Lake Tahoe, land in Folsom. So, but they turned out to be good guys, and we're still friends.
Okay. That's amazing. So I want to basically take a break here for a second. So if you found this podcast helpful, hit the link to Shatterproof Yourself Light. These are 7 small steps to a giant leap in your mental health. And so we talk about 7 steps that you can take right now. It's a brief 25-minute video. You can watch it, you sign up, and these steps are tools you can apply right now. I mean, from 25 years as a mental health professional, these things can change your life. Any one of them can change your life. I mean, I know that sounds cliche, but this comes from my experience with people making it simple, making it stick, taking action. So it's on clarifying your vision, facing your past adversity. That's step 2, knowing your values. Step 3, step 4 is shifting your perspective, owning your emotions. Step 5, step 6 is self-care. And step 7 is building solid relationships. You only get access to it through hitting that link, getting on the list. You want to check that out. Don't miss it. So the second thing, we talked about the first key to asking for what you want, to getting through that fear that you have of making that step, taking that step to ask for what you want, closing the sale, asking to close the sale. Second one is about attitude and mindset. That's a huge key, attitude and mindset. How do you grow in your attitude and have the mindset where you can deal with things in your life and you can deal with adversity, you can get and face rejection. So this is where I like to start with people who have a fear of rejection or fear of something in their life happening, getting hurt again. I want them to see that they can do some work on their mindset to change it and shift it. And so sometimes people have this mindset of, if I get rejected, it's personal. If I get embarrassed, my life's going to fall apart. If things don't go well, or I don't close the deal, or if things fall apart, my life's going to fall apart, not just one area of your life. And something I like to share with clients is the 3 Ps. We take it personally. We look at it as pervading our entire life. So if we're not doing well in our career, we look at our whole life is not going well. So we let it pervade all the different parts of our lives. And then we view it as being permanent. And so a mindset shift that I have made at times that helps me when I'm going to ask for a sale or reach out to people who could potentially reject me or not want to do business with me is to think about it as a way to help other people. I'm helping them solve a problem. Maybe there's a need that they have that I can help them solve. And therefore, I'm a great blessing to them. They may not know it. And when I first reach out to them, they may not see that yet. But just as my dad had shared, they had $300,000, 25% loan on a piece of property that was potentially done by the mob. Now, he helped them get a loan, or at least get some money at a lower interest rate, which helped them to start doing something more productive with the land, which led to them actually creating equity in the land and getting some money out of it and making that into a significant investment and not a burden. And that's really cool when you can think that this person doesn't know it yet, but my interaction with them potentially could identify a need where I have skills and unique abilities where I can use those unique abilities to help them. Because think about it, we're all in the business of helping people get to a better future if you want to. Like it's not about scarcity. When I think about it with people, and when it's about status and achievement and performance, then I'm competing with somebody else, right? Like that whole attitude is competition. There's only so much business and I got to be able to get this business before they get the business or someone else gets the business. But when I think about it in a healthy mindset, it's like there's plenty of business to go around because there's all kinds of people around. And I'm not the best person to help everybody. But if I reach out to different people, like my dad did in 50 different companies or whatever, around that one building that you had at some point, you made all these different connections. And then some of those people you were able to help over the next year, and it created business for the next year. But it would never have actually happened if you weren't willing to knock on the doors and get your portfolio bitten by a dog. But it was only happening because you took a risk to get out there and be courageous. So to work on that mindset, let's talk about that some here. Well, first of all, like what were the most challenging times in your career in real estate, let's say?
Well, I would say I got into the real estate when interest rates were 17, 18% in 1980. And so that was, that was the year 80, 81. That was pretty challenging because nobody could borrow any money and make it pencil. So that was challenging. And then when they had the big depression in 2008, I think it was,
Yep.
and the real estate market took big hits then too. So it's continually taking hits, but it's like periodic periods of maybe 4 to 8 years in between. So that was real tough. In fact, I almost left the business because it got so tough and it was hard to make any money. So I flipped over, instead of selling land and building industrial buildings, I went to investment properties and just sold investment properties where they were getting a decent return and they had good tenants.
I was thinking that was maybe, are you sure that was 2008? I think that was probably, wasn't that like the late 90s?
Yeah, it could be
The late 90s?
yeah.
90s,
Well,
in mid 90s?
2008, but also no, in
Yeah.
1983, and then it went bad in the 90s. The real estate was just
Yeah.
dead for maybe a year.
So what was your mindset or attitude when you were reaching out to people that you didn't know before you went in? Like, what were you telling yourself? How are you pumping yourself up to deal with that?
Well, first of all, I had a story, so I could, talk to them, and I think that was important. I had to have
What do you mean by having a story?
I had a good reason to stop by. And I just had to convince them that that's what they had. And unbeknownst to me, everybody has a commercial real estate question. Everybody has one or two that they want answered. So that helped tremendously.
Right there, because they would have a question that they would
Oh
want, and
yeah,
you were willing to answer it
and and the more time that they took, the more confident I would become.
because they were spending time with you.
Exactly.
And so, did you approach it? Because it seems to me that you had the attitude when you approached people, even if your attitude was that this could be a really great interaction, not that the opposite of that would be like this could go really bad. Some people approach interactions thinking this could go really bad.
Oh yeah, and
Like,
people have done that, but most of the time it went well, and it was a fun experience.
so is that the attitude going into it was like this could go well
Oh yeah,
and it could be fun. I would meet new people.
and usually, I mean, I did that my whole career.
Because yeah, and he had a car phone in like 1986. Wait, you had a car phone way before other people had car phones. Remember that thing you had?
Yeah, but that was I forget the year. But
It
I
was
guess
it was in the 80s,
yeah,
in the mid 80s.
it was like a
Yeah,
box.
it was like a box and it was very expensive. And I remember driving around with him and he would have this, it was always a yellow notepad, not a white one, and you would just take notes of properties that you saw, and you would fill this up throughout the day.
Yeah.
And how many miles would you put on a car every year with that? You put lots of miles.
Yeah, and I have no idea other than the fact that that Lexus had 130, I think.
Well, no, you had a Mercedes.
I mean, I also had a Lexus too, but the Mercedes had, when I bought them, it was brand new car.
It was.
Yeah, I sold that had like 200,000 miles.
Oh, you had like 300-some thousand on the diesel.
No, I don't.
You
think
had
so.
a lot of miles anyway, but you drove it a lot.
I did.
So how did you move past the challenging and through the challenging seasons in real estate when the interest rates or the market sucked? Like,
Well, if I was first just handling lease, then I'd switch over. But I started leasing industrial properties that moved into industrial land sales, and then that moved into industrial buildings, and then from there it went to investments. So I had to continually make adjustments. But every time I cold called, when I finish, even if it's just 2 or 3 hours, it would be such a pleasant experience for me. It'd give me all kinds of confidence. I could go for another 6 hours.
how did you structure the calls on people? Because what if you got in one conversation was like an hour long?
Well, usually I didn't, but sometimes it could be. But usually what I do is just say, hey, think about it. I'll call you back. And you got some questions. I've got to get these out today. And usually most of us said, fine, call me back. And I say, what's a good time to call? I marked it down, and I would pick up from just going to work in the morning and having a plan and exercising the plan was a great confidence builder.
How did you create the plan?
Just depended on what I had to talk about and where I was. If it was raw land, then I've got people that are interested in looking at raw land, and there you'd have to drive right to their house because it'd be far apart. So that was probably one of the easiest things. Just call them and start talking to them, and then just say, hey, I'd stop by and show you some of the stuff that we've got for sale and what we for sale. And everything that I did was kind of help build the confidence so that I mean, even to this day, I would call people and talk to them about, not necessarily real estate, but you'd be amazed at the people that have something that they want to talk about or they want to sell.
Always had something.
Yeah, there's always something.
So what is it then for somebody who lacks confidence with meeting new people, how would them, let's say somebody's brand new into the real estate business and they're struggling with meeting new people, how would you help them to build their confidence?
Well, first of all, there's books on building confidence out
There are.
there, that you've got. There's books that just good to read. So I read everything that came by me. I read, and I still do. I can have two books going at one time, but what I tell them to, one, know what you've got for sale. You've got a building, you should know it inside and out, and and what you can do with it. And then you got to be creative with the financing. So when the market got tough, then I'd be creative with the financing. So I made a connection with the money store, who ended up buying this building for 90 million. Basically, they got to know their product, and they've got to know, actually, if they can, find out something about who they're calling on.
Okay.
That always helps too, because that builds confidence. But I said the big thing is just go in there cold and just be flexible and be ready to talk about commercial real estate and what the market's doing and even the economy.
So what were some books that helped you with your confidence then?
Certainty, the first job, had a sales program sales thing where you could do the work. And I worked on it for, like, I would say 3, 4, 5 months. And then when I finally turned it in, it was just a confidence builder. It was a sales thing that you know about sales, different techniques to sell property or to sell roofing and insulation or to get to know the client. It was just a number of things along that line. And when I finished the thing, they'd never had anybody finish. Everybody got burned out on the thing. And they said, and I think it helped me get the Territory Manager of the Year award in like 1970. Yeah, 70. And you just keep coming up with uh, ideas, and just don't be afraid. And everybody has the fear. But you gotta, the first step is just knocking on the door. And then I said, if they're uncomfortable, just go in there and have something to show if you can,
Yeah.
and then just see where the conversation goes. And usually the conversation went to a whole bunch of different subjects, but it would focus mostly on the building and on the commercial real estate.
That's what I find too, is if I'm going to reach out to somebody, I can start thinking I got to know everything to say. And if it's a new business in my case, or a potential client, I got to know everything to say, everything. I'm prepared for every which way it could go. But that doesn't really go that well if I let go and then I just let it happen the way it's supposed to happen. I mean, it's good to be prepared, don't get me wrong, but after it happens and I push through the fear, I find that you just never know where it's going to go, but it's good a lot of times. Not always, but it's good a lot of times. So, well,
It's so good that it makes your whole day when it happens, and
when something surprises you, that ends up being a good thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You say, shoot, and and that's how the building. I mean, I mentioned the money store. I hooked up with them to make loans, and I sold a piece of property, and the property buyer got the first $1 million small business loan ever done in California. Was done right here in Sacramento.
So what was another situation where you reached out to somebody and you had the right attitude when you went into it, and then surprisingly it turned out to be a positive real estate situation?
Well, I got a hospital building for sale, and it was actually a warehouse with some offices for the hospital, and the tenant went bankrupt, and so the owners approached me, and I got the listing. So the first thing I did, it was between the river in Sacramento along our street, which is where the road tracks run. And I started cold calling that with a brochure on this thing. And it happened again. I picked up enough business in one day to last more than a year.
From that situation.
Just from knocking on the door, saying hello, introduce myself, and tell them I have a building down the street we got a problem with. If they got a few minutes, maybe they might have some suggestions on what to do.
Okay.
And
they were businesses that were nearby.
Yeah, they were down the street, but they were actually, some of them were 6 miles away.
Yeah. So I get the sense that you were able to cultivate an attitude that was like, this could go well and this could be fun and I'm going to enjoy this.
Yeah.
And so do you do that kind of stuff now at all? Because that's the thing about it. He's 85, but he still does some work right now. And so what kind of work do you do now, basically?
Well, we've got a mini storage that we just built. So we're building that, and it's just completed. We just opened. So I'm also hassling with Walgreens, who's a tenant. So some of the stuff is not fun, when you hassle with somebody who has 8,500 stores in the U.S. and another 5,000 in Europe, and they are difficult. And
so you deal with tenants and negotiating situations, basically.
Yeah, basically.
Okay.
So as little of that as possible, but Walgreens is on a 60-year lease, so have done some stuff that's ethically questionable, but they're owned now by Boots International, which is the largest drug company in Europe. So Walgreens is the lender, and so they think they can do whatever they want. The one thing they do know, if they don't pay the rent, their lease is canceled. And so they pay the rent on time.
And how do you stay motivated and keep the right attitude with business now?
It's tough, but something I own, I'm really motivated. So I'm a partner, and so we've got things. So you just have to bite the bullet and, and deal with the problem. That's the one thing too, is not put it off. If you put off something, that's one thing else I learned. You put something off, it never gets settled. It just becomes a bigger problem.
Just do it.
So you just got to deal with it. And I learned that a long time ago. If I got to cold call somebody, cold call them, get it done.
Get it done.
If I got a problem, talk to them and get it done. So that's what you have to do.
So that's a good segue to the third key to asking for what you want, to dealing with the rejection fear, is to get organized. Now, this could be the very first thing that you do, get organized. And number 2, deal with your attitude. And then number 3, be courageous. But I'm kind of going in this reverse order here. So get organized. So like, I am amazed that I can easily waste 2 hours of time a day just being on YouTube, just researching things, just time wasting kind of activities. And then when I have a plan, a business plan, a sales plan, I'm getting the sales plan thing ready right now. And that's been very helpful to me because I have target lists of companies that I've worked with before. I have prospects, I have people that I want to reach out to. And then I have some accountability with it where people are holding me accountable, like Lloyd, my operations director, holds me accountable. And my clients hold me accountable. I mean, people hold me accountable. Friends hold me accountable. So what I want to talk about here, Dad, is what are some of the secrets? First of all, because you're 85 and you're healthy. So how have you, this is about discipline, being organized. How have you stayed healthy up until now?
Probably just because I work out, daily usually. And because your sister got me into yoga. So every week I try to do 3 yoga classes, 3-hour workouts with weights, 3-hour swim. And, and basically that's what I do. I've been doing that for 50 years. And since I was in my 30s, so actually in my 20s. So
been working out.
So that keeps you there. And then also, don't drink and smoke. Those things, they all contribute to bad health.
Yeah.
And so, that's my main goal, is to make sure. And then also too, I try to do the workout and do some running or ride the bike. So I try to do a different exercise every day and then play golf 3 days a week. So all of those things keep me busy and they keep me healthy.
How do you keep your mind healthy?
Yeah, that keeps your mind healthy is doing those things. Or just like running, and you just clears your mind completely.
And what else do you do to keep your mind healthy?
Read a lot, so I enjoy reading, and I enjoy watching, like the soccer on TV. I enjoy that.
Mm-hmm.
That keeps your mind
Sports
clear. So you're not thinking about anything when you're watching something. But the best way for me is read.
is reading.
Yeah, I
Okay.
mean, I love a good book, and you give me a good book that clears my head. I'm in a different place.
So how did you, talking about organization and discipline, how did you organize your days back when you were earlier in your career as sales?
Well, first of all, you usually took over a territory from another salesman, and he would give you tips and tell you who were the ones to focus on. So then, what I tried to do is, if I had to cover like 200 miles in a day, whatever city I went through, I made sure I stopped and said hello to the roofers, any roofing contractors if there's around, or insulation contractors. And then if I had extra time and there was a lumber yard close by the building, lumber yard would go in and make sure I stop in. And I do that on a regular basis. So the first call was just an introduction. There was no discussion other than maybe if I had a pamphlet on a new roofing product, I could lead that with them and just say, hey, I'm coming through here once a month. I'll stop and see you next month. And if you happen to get in a situation where you need some roofing or a load of insulation, if you can't get through the distributor, call me and I can hook you up with somebody. Get it because it was allocated and it was you couldn't get it. You had to be a rotation of who could get product, especially when we had the energy crisis of the 80s. Insulation was allocated and you could only get so much. So if I do those things and make sure that I see these people regularly, that took care of my planning.
Hmm.
So
And then how did you organize your day when you got into commercial real estate?
basically, I had to, and it took me 2 years to make any money to figure it out. But you, first of all, start out leasing and you're working a building with another broker or agent. And if the market's flat, that's going to be very tough. So, but I made sure that I started cold calling and I drew a map of one industrial area in Sacramento that had maybe 300 industrial buildings in it. And I made sure that I met every one of the owners and talked to them. And it took me 6 months or a year, something,
Hmm.
and just talking to them, call them and say, I've got a building. I'm just going to stop by with a flyer, or I just cold call them. So I do either one. And then I had a map, and I had a map with every owner's phone number, every parcel number, the dimensions of it, the size of the building. So I had everything. So I knew every inch of that area.
And how would you organize, so how would you stay motivated to talk to 300 businesses over 6 months? What was the motivation behind that?
Just to make a living, and commercial realtors who work properly make a very good living.
Okay.
So, so that was the key.
Who taught you how to do that?
Actually, nobody. I taught myself.
But somebody wasn't doing that? Like they were as disciplined?
No.
Did you can get inspiration from somebody else that was in the market as an agent that
No, nobody did it like I did it.
really?
Yeah, I mean, that actually call. Some people wait and just wait till somebody calls you, and I wasn't going to wait, but and maybe I did to start, and that's why it took me a year and a half, 2 years to make any money. But then I made some good money.
Did you have, when some people, when they start having success in business, then, and I know for me, when I start, like I have a deal that I close or whatever, get a new business, then I start to let down. Like, oh, I got, I can feel I can let down now. I don't like that though.
Yeah.
How do you push forward through the success
Well,
sometimes.
because
Like,
I mean, first of all, I know nothing's going to happen unless I do it. So it has to. You have to do it.
but did you have success sometimes and want to let go? I mean, you just kind of take your foot off the pedal, the gas so much.
Well, you take a break. You may go on vacation, something like that, and but it's. I don't remember. I just do. I was ready to retire when I retired, and then turned out I retired too early.
You've
And,
never retired, have you?
yeah, so now I have I'm basically trying now, even though I'm working on a couple of different projects, and I've got builders that call me for lots, and and I find them, and they're very expensive, man. All their stuff is now. So, but I was able to stay motivated because I needed to make a living, and I had a family, and I had three little kids, you know.
Who was your favorite of your three kids? Just kidding.
No.
All right. Yeah. So that time management stuff. So you have any secrets? Somebody's new and they're new in the sales kind of field and they get distracted because they're afraid. Any advice to help them to stay focused on making the calls?
Well, just to say you're afraid with everything you do in life, if it's new, and everybody has got this fear, and I think that's the first thing you got to understand. You're not alone.
Yeah.
Everybody's like you. You're going to find some people that can't overcome this, but the ones that can overcome it and go out and make this a fun job are the ones that are going to be the most successful.
You make it fun, even though it's scary. You make that scary fun.
And you meet so many nice people, and you meet some smart people, and you learn.
And I think it's so, a lot of business owners are some of the coolest people you'll ever meet. And they are humble and they have a lot of generosity inside of them that they want to give and help other people. That's what I have found, that they get a bad rap, but you meet them and it's like, where have you been? Because they're not flashy. That's one of the things I find is that a lot of very successful people are not nearly as flashy as you think they are. You think they would be, and they're willing to give you advice and feedback. And so I'm inspired by that because it's pretty cool that you meet some great people. So I would say for me, just hearing that, like, it could be really good when you meet new people.
Oh yeah, it's fantastic.
Yeah. And I remember that. I remember you modeling that, like, don't be afraid to meet new people and make connections. And one thing I've heard from you as you talk is you would make connections with one business owner and then they would give you they would point you in the direction of another business owner possibly.
Oh yeah.
Or they would give you some piece of advice that you weren't expecting about the area that was like a new piece of information that would help you to sell or to lease out a building that you wouldn't have gotten.
Yeah. And the one thing about it is, though, they won't tell you how much they paid or sold things, but there's ways to find out, but
why wouldn't they tell you how much they paid for it?
Because it's just
private.
Just private.
You could find out though.
Yeah.
Well, so
what was funny was when I traveled to other towns and would stop and have lunch with a builder or architect, usually they would share some story with me.
Yeah.
About some business venture. And so you'd pick up all this information about outside business ventures, and they would even tell you how much money they made.
Yeah.
On personally, sometimes, especially a lumber yard where the manager of the lumber yard gets a percentage, and everybody gets a percentage.
Yep.
So
it's funny. My dad told me once when I was going through a big career challenge situation, maybe 15, 18 years ago, in the Great Recession, actually. And I was not sure if I was going to stay in the mental health field. And I'm really glad I did, because that led into career coaching. And I was unemployed for a period of time. And he said to go to like a wealthier neighborhood and just knock on the door and ask them what they do for a living. Just say, you're looking at changing careers. And I would express, like, I'm looking at changing careers, and what do you do for a living? And that's a piece of advice that I remember. Actually, I took that advice. I kind of put my own twist on it, but I was asking and met people that I didn't know. And I asked them, because I knew they were successful, and I asked them like how they made their living, and got some really good pieces of advice through that. It was basically cold calls of people and finding out how they made their money.
And they're very successful people.
Yeah, right. And they were willing to share how they, and whether it was like a niche way that they made money in an industry that I already was familiar with, like financial planning, or whether it was that they in a certain type of business that they had. Like I remember people that owned restaurants, but they had a different way that they ran their restaurant that I thought was very unique and was exciting and interesting. Or even people that they didn't actually own the franchise, they owned a company that supported that specific franchise. I'm like, that's even a business. I mean, there were ideas I didn't even know existed for making money because I was willing to actually ask some people, but it was inspired by my dad to go do that. And like I said, I mean, I put my own twist on it. I didn't go out and do it the way he suggested it, but I did do it, and I got some information. And I remember a real big shift in my life was made when I started to reach out to people and get more information and not be so afraid back then in 2008 and 2009. And then that actually helped me to start the business in 2012 that I have now, and the career shift that I made in the same industry, basically, but a new shift in that industry, which has helped me greatly. So one last question, and we're going to wrap it up here. So if you had one piece of advice on business and that you would want your grandchildren to know on having a successful career, what would that piece of advice be?
Well, make sure that you are a good reader. And, I would say you need to, very helpful if you make sure you get out of college. I think that's helpful.
Okay.
And that, don't be afraid of challenges, and to make sure that you're always stay inquisitive and ask questions.
Inquisitive and ask questions. And that's what you did when you called on people.
Oh yeah. Just like you mentioned that this neighborhood, somebody could write a book on what people make.
Just go through this neighborhood, ask them what they do for a living, how they made their money. And I would be very glad to, because you're not a threat. You're not going to take over their business. You're not a competitor. They're probably going to be very honored that you asked them for feedback on their success and that you want to learn from them, which most people are drawn to somebody that's really genuinely interested in their life.
Well, and things change too. Everything changes. Commercial real estate is basically the same today as was 40 years ago. So there's some things, mental health is changing.
Sure.
And commercial real estate is changing, but you still need commercial.
The foundation is the same.
Yep.
Like the foundation of mental health has been the same for 2,000, 5,000 years. I mean, it's just different nuance. And so I read a quote that reminded me of going to people and reaching out to them. Like it was from Mary Kay, who started Mary Kay Cosmetics, Mary Kay Ash. She said, well, remember when you look at somebody who's a potential client or customer, imagine having a sign around their neck saying, make me feel valuable, make me feel special, make me feel valuable. And if you go into the interaction, remembering that everyone wants to feel valued and valuable, it's going to help you to sell. And she built a huge, massive business through that mentality. By people want to feel valued. Like if you talk to a stranger that owns a business and you ask them for their feedback, that's a way to help people feel valued and valuable because you want their advice, which is incredibly powerful kind of thing. So let's go ahead and summarize. And so it's three keys for you to ask for what you want, to reach out, to take a risk. And one of the keys was not cold calling, although that kind of is tied to the first key, which is just be courageous, take an action. You got to start doing something. So let's start. The second one is to shift your mindset, your attitude about people. Like my dad shared, hey, see them as friendly. Don't see them as mean. When you go into a new interaction, have that kind of attitude. And I've seen him do that, so much so I have that kind of extroverted personality. And I thank him for that, because when I do go in interactions, a lot of times it's like, this is exciting and fun. And I can be my goofy, wild self. And, some people won't like that, but I can be myself. And people are going to be attracted to that. Ultimately, good people like you to be yourself. And the third one is to be organized and to find systems to being organized, which I saw him do that. I know those things have changed somewhat, but a calendar and checking off the boxes and having a list and getting through that list is what I've seen you do. And it's been really cool to see how that can play out in my own life as well. So I want you to focus on right now, what is one thing that you want to take away from this podcast today? Some little nugget that from my dad, Eric Gragg, or something that was shared, a story, whatever, that you want to apply to your life, that you can apply to your business, to your relationships, to situations in your life. And I want you by the end of the day today to make some kind of application. So if you do something, if you want to make transformational changes in your life, 20% is insight. You're gaining insight today, but 80% is action. What are you going to apply by the end of the day today? So are you going to make a cold call or make a list or get organized or shift your mindset thinking that they could like me and not necessarily reject me, or I have a ton to offer to help them solve their problems. And it's not something I don't have to worry about offending them because I want to help them if I'm going to reach out to somebody new. So what are you going to take away and apply to your life? And if you really wanted to stick, teach it to somebody else. Hey, I learned this new thing today on the Decide Your Legacy podcast. So remember to sign up for Shatterproof Your Self-Light. Check it out. There's a 4-page worksheet. You print that off and go through it. And then tell your friends about the podcast. Give it a rating and review on Apple or Spotify, wherever you get your podcast content. Really love you to help the word spread. That helps it to come up in feeds organically so more people can be helped. So I want to close the same way that I always do. First, thanking my dad for coming on the show. Thank you very much. But I want to close the same way that I always do. Make it your mission to live the life now that you want to be remembered for 10 years after you're gone. How do you want people to talk about you at Christmas 10 years after you're gone? That's an important thing. You decide your legacy, nobody else. I appreciate you greatly, and I will talk to you soon. Thanks for tuning in. Bye-bye.
This show is part of the ICT Podcast Network. For more information, visit ictpod.net.